Hi, my name's Prumihimo, and for many years now I've specialised in making jewellery using Kumihimo braiding techniques. And what I'd like to show you is how to finish off your braids to make some really fantastic jewellery. Now, there are lots of different ways of finishing off your braids and attaching clasps, and many of them are very effective, some of them are not so effective. What I'd like to show you today is how to attach your clasps or end caps using the gluing method. And these instructions will work for braids made in any sort of way, on traditional equipment, on the round disc, on the square plate, or of course on my patented Prumihimo disc. You can also use these techniques for gluing in leather, macrame, other textiles sort of jewellery making. So let's get started by talking about the sort of glue we're going to use. Now, there are a lot of glues on the market. I'm just going to take you through three main ones. The first one is this sort of gel type of super glue. There are different sorts of brands and formulations. This, if used correctly, is very effective. However, it is very, very quick. You've got to be pretty fast to get this right. And I teach in a lot of workshops and I see the problems people have with different sorts of glue. And this one, the speed at which it sets can be a problem for some people. An alternative is the sort of clear type of jewellery glue like this. Now this one is very slow, so that gives other problems. You really need to leave it for a long time to set and cure, and that can be frustrating for people, and if it's touched too quickly you will compromise the bond. So for this video, what I'd like to take you through is the two-part epoxy resin, which is fast becoming the go-to glue for people who are experienced with Kumihimo jewellery making. You may get it in a syringe, you may get it in 2 tubes or 2 bottles. There are lots of different brands and lots of different formulations, but they all share the same properties in that they are 2 separate glues. One is a resin and one is a hardener, and they need to be mixed. So what you need to look for is one that's fast acting and clear. And the fast acting ones tend to set in either 3 or 5 minutes. And that is absolutely right for giving you enough time to position your clasp and getting it just right. So that's why I use two-part epoxy. Now, some people are concerned about the idea of a mixing glue. They think it's going to be difficult, or they think it's going to be messy, or they think it's going to be wasteful. Well, I strongly recommend that you give it a go, because once you've tried it, you'll find it's very easy to use. And if you follow my instructions, you'll find a way of using just the amount that you need. So it's very economical, and the bond is very, very strong. The other advantage is this glue can be used to fill up some gaps. So if your fit between your braid and your end cap is not exactly right, if there's a tiny gap, this is the one glue that can be used to fill up those gaps. So it's an all-round great performer. Right, so let's have a quick look at the sort of clasps that you might be using. They fall into 2 main categories. You get this sort of clasp where you have an integrated clasp and end cap. This particular one is a hook and eye. This is a similar sort of construction. Again, the braid is stuck into the end of the clasp. This one happens to be a toggle. Or you've got the sort which is magnetic, which is a very neat finish, little bullet ending like that. So those are all integrated clasp and end cap. Or alternatively, in all different sorts of shapes and sizes, you've got the sort of end cap that you glue in your braid into the end cap and then attach your clasp separately. So here the clasp is attached with jump rings. And this sort of clasp, you need to make sure there's no hole in the end. What I'd like to show you is a 2-part method of attaching your Kumihimo to the end. The first part is sealing and securing the braid, and the second part is gluing it into the end. And if you follow these steps, you'll find it's much easier to get a good fit and a reliable bond with the glue. Before we proceed, I just want to say a word about the manufacturer's instructions. It's really, really important that you read them thoroughly. The manufacturer knows what he's put into those glues, knows the hazards and the strengths. So it is extremely important that you understand what to do with the glue, and each glue will be a little bit different. The things you're looking for are, first of all, what materials this particular glue is designed to be used with. The second thing is the drying time and the curing time. And the third and most important thing are the safety instructions, which will give you indications of how to protect yourself, how to protect your working area, ventilation, all those sorts of issues. And it's very, as I say, it's very important that you do follow those. And that applies to any sort of glue that you use. So we're going to start with sealing the braid. The first part is optional, and that is a small binding. The reason it is optional is that the second part is gluing, and that will hold the braid steady. But if you're using very heavy beads, or if your beads are very close to the end of the braid, it is advisable to do this extra stage of a little binding. The way we do that is with some strong thread on an ordinary needle, and you're going to just pierce the braid at about the point where you know your end will cover this. You don't want the binding to be seen. Just pull the thread through nearly to the end, and then pierce through again and again. And what I'm doing here is just trying to secure the thread in the braid so that when I pull on it, it doesn't move. Now I think that's about right, so I'm just going to give it a little tug. Right, no movement there. So now what I do is just hold that tail down and bind around about 6 or 7 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's fine. Now holding it tight with my finger underneath, I'm going to do the same thing as I did at the beginning and just secure the thread in the braid. Close to some parts of the braid will be a little bit tougher to go through as you go through the core of the satin cord. It all depends what you're using. But again, we're just going to go through a few times to just secure that thread. And the advantage of using this method of binding is that you don't have to worry about any knots. So that was a bit of a tough bit. I'll go through another bit. There we go. You can see sometimes it slides through as you slide between the cords, and other times just like this, it's a little bit tougher. I'm having to give it a bit of a squidge there. There we go, we're through. And then what I can do is just snip off really close. No knots, so no extra bulk inside the clasp. So that completes the optional first part of the sealing of the braid, and that is the binding. So now this is the second stage of the sealing. What you need is your 2-part epoxy glue, and you'll find that's both resin and hardener. You also need a little bit of flexible plastic. This is just something I've cut from a milk carton. It does need to be flexible and something that you can dispose of later. And 2 cocktail sticks. When you use this glue, you need to be very careful that you do not mix the glues until you're ready. So the way to do it is, first of all, to start with, I always start with the resin first. Take the cap off, put a small amount of the resin into the middle of the plastic, and then make sure you put your cap on carefully. But you don't want to get the caps mixed up. You'll always find they're different colours, or there's some way of identifying them. Then take the hardener, and you need equal quantities. It can be difficult to see because the hardener tends to be a little bit less viscous than the resin. And put that beside the resin like that. Put the top on. It as I say, it can be difficult to see. If you think you haven't quite got it equal, you can go a little bit more towards the hardener. If you don't put enough hardener in, it will never set, or will take very, very long to set. If you put too much hardener in, it sets too quickly. While they're sitting separately like that, you've got plenty of time. But as soon as you mix them, you will only have as long as your particular glue has. And this particular one sets in 3 minutes. So what I'm going to do is take a cocktail stick and start to mix the glues together. You need to mix them thoroughly, but not too vigorously, because you don't want to cause bubbles. So I'm just mixing around gently. I realise it's difficult to see because it's clear. Some glues you'll find one is a slightly different colour. And what you can do is keep just bringing the glue into the middle with your cocktail stick, because what you want to be able to do is just be very economical in your use of glue. I'm going to give it another mix. And then I'm going to bring it all to the middle again so that I can use it all. Now, I'm going to discard that cocktail stick because it's got glue all the way up it. I'm going to take another clean one and I'm going to just pick up a small amount of glue like that and paint it onto my braid. And I'm going to go to just about 1 millimetre towards the beads from the binding. And then it doesn't matter how far you put the glue that way, because you're going to cut your braid somewhere around here. You don't want to put too much glue in that direction because that will show outside of your cap. And with this glue, I'm just going to paint it all the way round. And this will form almost like a little plastic sleeve so that you can cut through the braid without the fibres spreading out and making it difficult to get it into the clasp. Now, if you haven't done a binding, it's exactly the same thing. You just identify where your clasp is going to sit and make sure that your little band of glue, which is about 1 centimetre wide, is going to be inside your clasp. So once you're happy that you've spread that neatly all the way around, then you can leave it somewhere to dry. So you want to reach the stage where the glue has dried. There's no stickiness whatsoever, but it's not too hard, because this glue can dry quite hard. So if you leave it for hours and hours, it will be quite hard to cut through. You'll need quite strong scissors to cut through it. I'm using shears here, but kitchen scissors will do the job just as well. And what you want to do is cut the braid at the right point to fit the end cap that you're using. So to do this, make sure you've looked carefully at your end cap and identified how deep the cap goes. If you're not sure, cut it a little bit longer. You can always keep trimming it till you get it just right. So I've got quite a deep cap here, and I know the end comes about here. So I want to cut my braid about there. That's what I'm going to go for, using my shears, and just cut straight through like that. Now, sometimes you might have a cap that is conical inside. So at this point, you can trim the edges so that they're conical or in whatever shape you need for your end cap. But as you can see, that glue has kept the ends under control. So you can really play around with it at this stage and get it right. You can also, because it's soft, you can also squeeze the ends in a little bit if necessary. So I'm just going to check, and that's about right. In fact, no, I think I'd like to take a little bit more off. A tiny bit of glue was visible. So that's quite simple to do. And this is the point where you can do as much adjustment as you need. Again, squeezing the ends in. Now, am I a bit happier with it? Yes, I think I am. Yes, I think I'm happy with that. Also at this stage, try to identify how much room there is left in that end cap. Because if there's a lot of room, you can use a reasonable amount of glue, but if it's just a small amount left, then you will only need a small amount of glue. And this is going to be a matter of judgment, to be honest. So having stabilised the end, trimmed it to shape, you can now mix your glue again. So in the same way as before, simply a blob of the resin, you're not going to need much, And I actually recommend doing just one end at a time. It can be very tempting to try to do a job lot, and you can end up with wonky ends, which of course you don't want. And you may have noticed there a little bubble came out with the glue, and you do need to keep an eye on that. But I think that's about even, because this hardener is a little bit stiffer, so it's a little bit higher up. So same method as before. I'm going to use one cocktail stick to mix thoroughly but gently to avoid bubbles. I'm going to keep bringing it into the middle so that I can use quite small quantities when I need to, and reduce wastage as much as possible. Then I'm going to just bring it all in again. And this is why it helps to have a little flexible piece of plastic to do it on. I'm going to discard that stick and use a clean stick now. I'm going to take one side of the end, and first of all I'm going to pick up some glue with my cocktail stick and rub it round the inside. Now there was a reasonable amount of space there, so I think I can pop a little bit more in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end of the braid and I'm going to put a little bit more on there, because it's very important to have as much contact as possible between the braid and the clasp. So I've popped a little bit more there, and now I'm simply going to put the end on, and I'm going to use a twisting motion. If you've got a little bit too much glue, as I possibly have there, you can just wipe it off at this stage with your cocktail stick and then leave it to dry. Now what's really, really important is that you leave it for the full drying time and the full curing time. With this glue, you'll find that within 3 or 5 minutes, depending on the brand, the glue will start to stiffen and the clasp will start to grip on. So once you've got to that stage, you can leave it somewhere to dry. Don't try to use it or put any stress on that glued end for 24 hours or whatever is indicated in the manufacturer's instructions of the particular glue you use, because if you do that, you will compromise that bond. And so when you're happy that that end has been properly glued, then you can glue the other end. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that and I hope you found it useful. Don't forget, practice makes perfect. If you want to find out other ways of ending off your Kumihimo, just hit the subscribe button, because I've got some new videos coming on stream shortly. And if you hit the subscribe button, you'll be notified when I load them up. Also, don't forget to take a look at my website, Prumihimo.com, where you'll find lots of other ideas about all aspects of Kumihimo, including my own disc, my patented disc, the Prumihimo disc, and my book about the Prumihimo disc as well. So thank you again very much for watching. Bye.